You think tech people would actually be good at tech some days?
Jason, I don't think your camera is on.
Yeah, it looked like it was black on my side too. Hold on just a second.
It's showing your icon.
Okay. Well, in 12 seconds, I'll jump in, do a 1-minute introduction, and then you guys are on, okay?
There we go.
All right, good day to everybody. I'm wishing everybody a terrific Tuesday. I'm Peter Daneyko of Core Connects. As we continue on day 2 of our Core Summit Talks, Empowering Growth, and today's actually one of my favorite topics, how to promote your offerings and attract the right investors. While this week we focus on the cannabis sector, this topic relates to all industry sectors. As we know, Regulation CF and Regulation A Plus facilitate investor participation of both the accredited and the non-accredited investors. And that's the private industry and the public at large. Now, the messaging of telling your story has a lot of moving parts. Like any marketing, you need to know your potential investor audience and budget accordingly. As companies look to get their message out to their audiences, it's absolutely critical they understand where to begin. That means lots of pre-planning questions. Do you already have a brand advocate base, or are you starting fresh? What types of media should you use to tell your story, such as video? And what channels should you share your messaging with? Email, social media, publications, industry-specific channels. You also need to be aware of what you can and what you can't say and when. Just because you saw it being done elsewhere does not necessarily mean it's compliant with the regulations and, most importantly, the SEC. Now, technology is here to get your message out there, but now also has the ability to efficiently manage tens of thousands of shareholders, which literally was unheard of not too long ago. In fact, a couple of private companies we work with have over 1 million shareholders on the cap table. Now, I say that because the importance of pre-raised marketing to potential new investors, but also communicating with your existing investor base now into the future is all part of the mix. So today's panel of seasoned marketing investor acquisition veterans are here to provide key insights into promoting your offering and attracting investors. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce your moderator today from Digital Niche Agency, Jason Fishman. Jason, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that introduction. Thinks it gives a good overview of the vertical and why this discussion is so important. As Peter mentioned, I'm with DNA. We've worked on over 300 investor marketing campaigns, have collectively produced 9 figures of capital, have tried channels that have worked, have run messaging that did not, have optimized things to a point of effectiveness, and able to share a lot of those learnings here today. But excited to be with the panelists, look at them as the top agencies in the space for investor acquisition, that part of the planning that determines how you're going to get actual investors to your offering, get them to invest, and add enough volume to hit your goal. And want to start with the question and even an intro for each team member. So we can go through the panelists and you could do an intro and explain, why is it necessary to have investor acquisition? Why is it necessary to have a firm? And how is this different from another marketing agency? Dawson, I know we've been on these panels before. Maybe you want to kick things off.
Absolutely. So Dawson Russell with Capital Raise Agency. We did our first Reg D offering about 13, 14 years ago. So we've been in the capital raise space for a while. And then over the last few years, obviously have transitioned over into more of the Reg CF, Reg A space. But absolutely, I think it's a really, really great question to start off with, as far as, do you actually need an investor acquisition firm? How is that different from a marketing firm? And I think, a lot of times what we find out is, typically is people are getting ready to do their raises. They're obviously vetting different companies. They're having multiple calls. And sometimes we talk to issuers that have talked to what we would consider more of a traditional marketing agency, which, I mean, there's absolutely a ton of great ones out there. The problems that people run into is really when it comes to, disclosures and what can we say and what we cannot say. And so I think one of the things that we've tried to highlight in those conversations is, listen, we realize everyone has a different fit for a particular agency. I feel like we, work well with other agencies in the space as well, but find someone that knows what they're doing when it comes to, regulation and SEC and FINRA and how they're going to submit things to broker dealers. And so that's the one thing that I would say, when you're looking at a marketing agency, yes, you want to find the best of the best, but find someone that has experience in this space and knows what exactly they can do and can't do. Because unfortunately, if something happens and something goes out that shouldn't have gone out, then everyone's going to be in trouble. So that's kind of how I would lead it off is, there's a ton of great marketing agencies in this space. A lot of them obviously represented here on this call. And so I think just, really knowing the difference between investor acquisition firms versus just a e-commerce or marketing firm that you could find anywhere.
And Jillian Bannister, honored to be
Great.
on the panel with you here as well too. What are your thoughts on this? And could you give an intro on your firm?
Sure. So Jillian Bannister, CEO of Extension Marketing. We our offices in Canada are in Toronto and New York. So cover North American geography. I totally agree with Dawson's point of view on understanding, working with people and partners that understand the regulations. The SEC is really focused on making sure that everybody is following the regulations. So you really want to focus on, creating a strategy that's about pulling potential investors into your campaign versus pushing out your offer. And so there's a lot of nuances and complexity when it comes to language and what you can and can't do when you think about that framework that the SEC has put out there. We're a little bit, unique in the sense that, we were a marketing agency 13 years old. Have been doing this a long time, focused only in the capital raising and investment management space. We actually started working on the capital raise space in the institutional market. And then obviously with the advent of, retail marketing campaigns, moved into that space several years ago. I think another key thing to think about when you're choosing a marketing partner to work with is really making sure that they are able to understand the audience and get the right messaging. Messaging is one of the most critical aspects of it. It's, it's kind of like fixing your furnace. It's like words on a Word document, but it is actually a critical part of your strategy when it comes to developing your campaign, because it's what is going to connect you to an investor, a potential investor that doesn't know you and doesn't have a relationship with you. It's the way you're going to drive engagement. So I would say that's something that you really got to think about and ask the right questions when you are choosing a marketing partner.
Excellent. So we've talked about compliance. Love how you pointed out pushing versus pulling of the messaging of the offer, as well as audience and overall messaging as a whole. Derrick Barney, excited to have you here with us. Cannabis.wiki. What can you add to the discussion? Can you tell us more about your group?
Sure. So we're a news and information resource about cannabis. Been in the space since legalization in Canada. Come from a marketing background, usually doing media buys to generate leads. And when we seen the cannabis market open up in Canada, decided to build a property. So instead of having to buy traffic, we could actually just generate it. So we're part of Associated Press, Canadian Press, Reuters, Google News. When we put out 3 to 5 articles a day with long tails generating traffic, SEO traffic for cannabis. We have about 2 million monthly uniques. And, we kind of just bring the cannabis community to it. So About the regulation and stuff, I would defer definitely to you guys. You guys are the experts in that. We're just more of basically a news education resource that also there's a law. I don't know if you guys are aware of it up here in Canada. It's called C45 because we are federally legalized in Canada. There's a law called C45 which severely limits marketing and advertising. And so you're not allowed to use celebrity endorsements. You're not allowed to actually promote the consumption of cannabis. But one of the exemptions is if it's newsworthy or if it's educational. So you can basically view Cannabis Wiki as a compliant landing page in that marketing funnel where you can get the information out in a compliant way.
So being able to, again, know the compliance and then find different workarounds. So if it's an educational link, hey, now you are able to say more and talk about the product for the cannabis vertical further. The other thing that I want to add for investor acquisition and how we differ from another marketing agency or even an internal marketing department, because we do work with groups with full in-house teams, is the experience, the audience, and the team. The experience in the sense of we've all worked on a high volume of these campaigns. We know what the path forward looks like from planning to month 1 to month 2 to different stages and extensions to the closing messaging to what occurs in between rounds. Just did a webinar on 9 things to do in between raises, working with one client on their 5th round right now. We can bring these insights to the table. The audience, the next piece, I would say, for my agency and what we do with advertising, what we do with outreach is our biggest value proposition. Have over 1 million investor profiles. We've targeted client campaigns with this. Different than other third-party audience data that's available, have a sense of those data sets and libraries as well too, and can target accordingly for different investor profiles. And then the team, being able to have a team of individuals. I have media buyers who've worked on hundreds of campaigns, content marketers who've worked on a high volume of these across different industries. So that's what I've seen there. I don't want to bucket everything together as investment crowdfunding. There's Reg D to accredited investors only, Reg CF, retail and accredited, as well as Reg A plus to both those audiences, both different caps, Reg CF at 5 million, Reg A plus up to 75 million per year. Not even touching on Reg S. Just looking at Reg D, Reg CF, and Reg A plus, what differences do you guys see in terms of marketing, in terms of funnels, in terms of traffic sources across each of these filings, across each of these initiatives?
One thing we've seen a lot of, and we have a Finfluencer network that we have access to, is that on the CF side that really plays well. It's an interest, we've seen some great successes with some big companies too in that. But one thing that I have seen a lot of, or more recently, is this narrative around having not just building an investor database or list of prospects, but building clients and customers alongside that. And I do see a lot of that conversation happening at the Reg CF level, where I don't just want an investor, I want someone who buys into my brand and who buys my product. So it is sort of a trend we're seeing out there. And you can do both. I mean, with one of these raises and one of these campaigns.
Absolutely. Seeing those funnels.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, was just saying, seeing those funnels go from investor to customer and back and forth on the Reg CF and Reg A plus is huge. Dawson, are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've definitely had campaigns where either because of where they were at in the journey of their business, they didn't have a customer base, and then the ones that have, and it's definitely one of those things where obviously, as we're doing kind of that discovery process, if we find out they have a huge customer base and a huge email list and a huge social following, I mean, I'd be lying if I said we weren't a little bit more excited to jump into those type of raises, because you just know people that already believe in the product and already believe in the brand, the percentage of those that are going to potentially invest are so much higher and just so much warmer to the brand. You're not having to do brand education. You're not having to provide any type of credibility, as long as that brand has done a good job, obviously communicating to their base. And so, it gives people a little bit of a leg up to obviously start the campaign off on a good foot. And I think it's also good at the same time that people are educated that, if you don't have a customer base and you don't have a client list, that's not the end of the world. It just does require a little bit more time and potentially a little bit more money to get things off the ground. So that's the one thing I would add, just as far as audiences go. You're going to have super, super warm audiences if they've already brought your product, have it in their house, love using it, and find out they can become a shareholder in your company. Then yeah, you're halfway there. So I think that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you think about your capital raise campaign as also a brand building campaign, I think that gets you a little further into it. And Dawson's right. Like, if you don't have that, it's not the end of the world. You're just going to have to kind of come to terms with the fact it's going to take more time. It's going to take probably more dollars because you don't have that brand recognition, or at least the starting point of that brand recognition. So that's just something also to be cognizant of when you kick off any raise you're doing.
Almost like you have a first step of audience building so that you could take them further down that funnel in their consideration process. Where if you have that starting point, as Dawson's mentioning, of a large engaged funnel, large engaged audience, you have that head start. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just means you have to put more efforts into that audience building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Derrick, are you seeing? Didn't mean to talk over there. I think I have a lag on my side.
No, I just wanted to add real quick to Jillian's point. I think it's a great thing also, if you don't already have that type of list, to recognize that while doing this type of campaign, you are doing a massive brand awareness campaign. So while, yes, you might not have someone invest day 1 or day 30 or ever, you might potentially grab them as a customer, depending on obviously what your business model is. So there's kind of this dual marketing approach that I think a lot of times as people go into the campaign, they're not really even thinking that direction. They're just thinking investment, which totally understand. But there is a huge avenue of brand awareness and B2B development, or anything that could happen from that amount of ad spend and advertising that's going out.
And that's why it's really not just only about the media spend. It is back to basics in marketing. Key messaging, your brand, what you are putting out there. Once it's out there, it's out there. So you really want to make sure that you're, thinking that through, turning on that marketing brain in your head, and using partners who understand marketing and what works and what doesn't to help you formulate, a little bit of your brand as you're going out to do your race.
Yeah, what I would say is, specifically to cannabis, I think you guys are probably, like, in the US at that really sweet spot where it's, if you're a cannabis company and you're considering raising, you should do it now. What we found here is that, once it federally legalized, that's when, like, a lot of laws came in, and to just make it difficult for brands to even just tell their story. So it's like, one of our main things is, like, just even getting the brand out there, getting the CEO, getting the founders talking about, how they connect to the cannabis community, and, like, what made them. A lot of them have, like, great stories of why they became a cannabis user or a CBD user. And it's like, by, telling those stories and kind of humanizing it and connecting with the consumers, you definitely can build an audience there. Especially, like, here, our packaging is kind of like pharmaceutical. Like, there's no like, it doesn't look good. It's all kind of, like a pharmacy kind of, right? So it's really hard to stand out in the crowd. And it's definitely something that needs to be done.
And for any of these raises, what I want to add to the discussion is, you start with these audience personas, and for Reg CF, Reg A plus, absolutely the investor customer, great area to target. There's also various types of retail investors that are looking to get involved in private equity. They are diversifying and getting involved in 5 to 10 different deals. How do you speak to them? How does that messaging change from other deals that they're seeing? How are you standing out? From there, the Reg Ds, main thing I want to point out is that longer sales cycle and to account for it. And there can be aspects of that are offline. You're going after accredited investors. I think a lot of the elements of the story are going to stand out to them in a similar fashion, but typically more tombstone ads, tombstone information, things that talk to some of the deal points. They're likely getting targeted with real estate ads. Reg D's really been embraced by real estate, and looking at IRR and looking at actual return projections and even some terms around it. So you want to look at how you measure up there on those type of filings. We're talking about audience. We're talking about existing brand advocates. How do you speak to those type of groups during a Reg CF? Dawson, you were mentioning, hey, if a brand already has an audience, what are the best ways to get them excited, to get action around the investment from those existing audience members?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that when we do find out that one of our issuers is going to have an email list that we're going to be able to send out to, I think and this is where we talked about it before of hiring an investor acquisition firm versus a traditional marketing firm. And I think one of the things that our data has shown, and just as we've gone through these campaigns, we've seen you've got to build up the story a little bit. You can't just all of a sudden send out an email that's like invest now, click here and expect people to just jump in immediately. You have to, especially depending on the audience, you have to almost educate them on why you're raising capital, what that's going to be used for, even potentially, sometimes you don't want to get too far in the weeds on it, but what is a Regulation A or a Regulation C? Like, what is crowdfunding? And so I think some of that education can be done either during testing the waters or, on the front end before you're actually sending out the invest, link to click on. And then also using things like webinars or video content to let the management or the CEO speak directly to their customer base on, listen, come along this journey with us. We, it's one of those things you've got to be able to relate to those customers and not make it feel so much like you're just really wanting them to reach into their pocketbook and checkbook and write a check, So I think that's one thing that we found is really, growing the story with that customer base before you actually open cart, so to speak, on the investment button is a big piece of something we would recommend. But yeah, that's kind of the 30,000 foot view, I would say.
Could I ask you guys a question? What have you guys had, for instance, say it's something that people would use. So say like a data company, Cannabis data company, and they're raising money, and they go, have you noticed and is it something that works kind of maybe giving them like a lifetime discount on the services or something like off to incentivizing the raise? Is that something that's done? And is that something that works in the space?
Yeah,
we have seen the use of perks.
There's a bit of a delay on my end too. Yeah, absolutely. Giving before you get is a whole concept of marketing that you need to embrace. Whether it's value add information, like a learning guide of some kind, or if your product warrants giving something away. We've worked with mobile phone type companies who give a device if you as part of being a shareholder. So you do have to think in those terms and provide something of value, right, to hook and bring in people. to start understanding what you're doing and just that first piece of engagement. So that is something I would also, we call it a lead magnet in marketing. But you do need a hook, and you need to give before you get. I mean, this is not just a transactional thing. Again, going back to this idea, this is a brand building exercise for you. And, building that credibility, your story. The other thing I just wanted to leverage off what Dawson was saying, like video, sharing the management speaking, the story behind why you started this company, what you're trying to do, what your goals are, what your vision is hugely powerful when you're going out and asking for people to invest. So you want to be thinking in terms of building a relationship without having the actual face-to-face or screen-to-screen connection. And how do you do that? The most successful type of engagement is through video.
Agreed. And to be able to take snippets of those videos to splinter it into social, to be able to talk about the traction over email. I'm a fan of social proof, third-party validation as much as possible. People don't believe what they see on the internet, even if they're following your company. The ability to see a major strategic partner, a lead investor, a new publisher, a podcast appearance she did, an event that you're speaking at this week, to have that spread out across a content calendar and take audiences exactly as Jillian's mentioning down that journey where they feel like they're going through that. They feel like they're growing alongside of you. Are key ways to say, hey, you can be more than a customer. You could get involved here. As Derrick's mentioning, there can be perks. There can be other benefits to being involved compliantly, and there's ways you can speak to that. There's ways you cannot, if there are share discounts and advertisements, from what we're told, of course. What about channels? I'm touching on a few here. Are there any key areas that you say every issuer should have? Whether that's a blog, an Instagram account, a LinkedIn, a Medium, or answering questions on Quora or Reddit. Are there any places that you would highly recommend to issuers?
I mean, I think one of the things that we've found is, if they are hiring us to manage those channels, that's one thing. If they're wanting to do that in-house or outsource it somewhere else, or have a nephew that is going to run their TikTok or something, it's just making sure that it's done consistently and done well for the brand's standards and guidelines. So I think sometimes what we've also seen is everyone tries to do everything, and what we try to talk to our clients about is let's find maybe 2 social platforms that we can really execute on and do really, really well. And then once we feel like we've done a great job on those, maybe then we move into TikTok or LinkedIn if we're on Facebook and Instagram. So I think not trying to be everywhere all the time can be I think a bad temptation for brands, versus like, hey, I feel like our audience is living on LinkedIn. Let's just tackle our LinkedIn and make it the best possible LinkedIn we can possibly be. So I think that's one thing I would say is just when you are looking at channels, don't feel like you have to go and do every single one unless you have the team that can really back it up and help do it, if that's internal or external team, whatever it is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You can't be on every platform. It takes a lot of content, a lot of team power to consistently feed the beast of those channels. So you do have to be judicious about it. Marketing is about making decisions, and sometimes those decisions are about what not to do. So that is, I would definitely do that critical thinking in advance, and that has to do with your audience. Unpacking of who your audience is and what you're going after as part of that discovery phase in a campaign process. So yeah, I think that's a really, really salient point, Dawson.
It's more important the engagement that you're getting on each of those platforms, the audience, like you're saying, Dawson, master a couple of those, take that show on the road from there, and audience build, and make sure you're building the right atmosphere, the right environment on those next platforms. Derrick, anything to add for channels and recommendations for issuers?
I would just echo what you guys are saying about building the kind of community around it. That's up here. It's definitely that's the most challenging part, just because of the regulations. If you can get out there, engage, and really get your story out there and get the community behind you. We've told a lot of stories. Like one I'll tell you is about a company called Sweet Justice, and they used to work for both of them used to work for Coke, and one 20 years, one 7, and they made a CBD and THC beverage. They got 4 SKUs out now, and basically, they told their story about, working for the corporate world and, being wrong there. And then, coming together with a side project. And that's why they named it Sweet Justice, because it's like kicking it to the man. Like, this is the sweet justice of us, coming together and launching our own product. And it's like, after like telling that story, consumers really gravitate towards that, and then they start support. Oh, I see Sweet Justice there. Let me get it. Let me try it. So it really is just about getting yourself out there and letting the consumers know, hey, like they have choices. Why should they choose you? And especially in the cannabis industry, people like to support good people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing I like to point out about channels and taking that message, being able to find the right people to support, is what is paid with advertising, what is organic with content marketing. I like to look at paid as a traffic source. We can then retarget and continue to use paid, but I look at the organic to nurture audiences. I'm not expecting the organic to prospect and bring in new investors. It can, but it may be tough to do that consistently or in a scalable fashion. So if we're looking at the content channels, we mentioned a webinar. Absolutely, probably my favorite one to mention. You could have a strong guest. If you doing a monthly, bi-weekly, what have you, that guest can then promote to their audience. It also shows that validation. You could splinter it out, as we talked about. You could transcribe it and take aspects and create an article. You could separately do an article. We'll interview founders, create an article in their voice. You could have video snippets from that video. Social, as Dawson mentioned, 2, maybe 3 channels. Do them well versus try to be everywhere. And as Jillian was saying, but like having that feed. I find social works very well for showing up in the due diligence of an investor as well. So if they're looking around, they don't see a post that's recent, they don't see any posts about the investment, it may say something. Where if you have an active feed, and again, taking audiences through that journey and pointing at what's next and showcasing that traction, because it's really the momentum that is investable about these deals and why the top campaigns are getting the majority of investments and how that message is being spread from there. Email fits into that too. Email is still a top communication channel. We're talking about audience building. The larger you could build your email audience, the more people you could reach, the more traffic you could generate very quickly. So I like talking about that when it comes to channels. I have a question for you. I haven't talked about this one, but let's say you're working on a channel and you're not getting enough engagement. This could be the campaign as a whole. Let's say you're just not getting enough performance. How do you approach that situation? I think every campaign finds itself there, whether it's a few days of a slowdown on one of the top Reg A Plus campaigns, or whether it's a Reg CF campaign that's looking to find viable channels that they can lean into and hit their goals. What do you do when a channel's underperforming?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you need to have the metrics to tell you that. So back to the original question was, definitely look for a partner that has a good data metrics platform to help you interpret the data and then use the marketing team to help give you insights on that. That performance marketing platform or data platform should be able to tell you in fairly real time what's working and what's not. Market, in a capital raise, it is about pivoting and optimization. So when we see things that aren't hitting the mark, and there doesn't have to the market impacts what's happening, interest rates, with the war in Ukraine, all those things have bearing on how your campaign is performing. So you gotta look at the metrics and then pivot. So whether it's optimizing the creative, optimizing the placement, channeling dollars elsewhere onto platforms that are performing. But that constant state of analyzing data and optimizing is really that's what we do. We don't want to be we don't want to be parking dollars on platforms that aren't performing. We can always go back. We can go back with a fresh creative. We can go back with something else. But we really, we like to be nimble and respond quickly because the markets are so volatile, especially these days, this year. And I think they're going to continue to be. So being able to react to all those movements that are happening, I think is pretty important, way of approaching a campaign.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And I think, one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, like paid publications or, anything like that, as far as, getting into Benzinga or, some of these, not financial publications, but just news publications. And I think one of the advantages too, once again, going back to the first question is, all of us on this call have probably tried a few different avenues and channels that just fell flat. And it's going to happen, obviously, from time to time. But the one thing that issuers get when they use an investor acquisition firm is some of that knowledge that is going to be transferred to their raise. So it's one of those things that if we go out into a cannabis publication and, we see zero results from it, yes, maybe we'll try it one more time, different messaging. But if we see zero results again, then obviously if another cannabis issuer comes to us and says, okay, let's put together the plan for, publications, we're probably not going to go back to that one. So it's one of those things that sometimes some of this just comes with experience and trial and error. And it's, Jillian, I love what you keep saying about, it is traditional marketing in the sense that, we do have to A/B test, we do have to tweak, we do have to, go into these different channels with kind of open expectations on what ROAS is going to look like. And it could be the market that month. It could be, there could be news that's coming out about cannabis that is positive, that's going to help, push some things. So it's one of those things that in some ways, yes, it is a moving target, but with using an investor acquisition firm that has done campaign after campaign, there's going to be some of those, stumbling blocks that we can jump over that maybe another marketing firm might not know right off the bat.
I agree with what you were saying, Jillian, about the testing. Obviously, you always have to be testing, not, spending the client's budget if it's not going to back out. There's really no excuse to waste money on a campaign. And I'd say that the biggest thing is angles. So it's like every single thing has an angle. So if it can have a bad angle and then a good angle. So you mentioned things like the war in Ukraine. Okay, so figure out an angle that's positive of why you should invest now because of that. So it's like those kind of, from my experience, and obviously I'm not talking about the capital raising market because that's your guys' expertise. But just generally, it's just finding an angle that works, not too aggressively, that also is compliant. That's basically the challenge of any campaign. And if it's not working, you probably have the wrong angle.
Yeah, I would say kicking off a campaign You got to be prepared to do that test and learn phase and not jump into ROAS. Like first call, tell me what my ROAS is going to be. Well, there's a million things that feed into that. So don't be afraid to test and learn. Don't be afraid of that period of time that's used to do the learning and the testing, layered on with, of course, the experience from a marketing partner. But that to me is one big hurdle that all people issuers have, is they want to jump right into what's my success metric going to be? How are you going to deliver it? And, this is a big place that we're trying to market to. And the markets are, there are so many things that feed into performance and what works and what doesn't. You couldn't possibly predict it every time. You could directionally have great ideas and understand. And as Dawson said, you can be nimble in responding to the data that you're getting. That's what you get when you work with an experienced partner. But yeah, I would just say, don't be afraid of that test and learn period. Embrace it, and then know that you're going to get great information that's going to help you capitalize on where you're finding success at the time you're doing that raise.
And based on the analytics, not just assumption, really want to echo what you're saying on the ROAS metrics as well too. You can't just focus on the results. You have to look at the process. That's where you're going to be able to make meaningful optimizations. And it's clear that we do the same things on a day-to-day basis. We use the terminology. We summarize what we do into 3 words: test, optimize, scale. Name my podcast. Everything's a test until the analytics are showing that it's working. Even then, you want to optimize it to a better point, optimize what's not working, look to manage it to a point of effectiveness, look for opportunities to scale. If you have one article that works, great. What's the next one? How are you going to continue that similar type of traction, that similar type of rollout? Really like what Jillian was pointing out for current events. I hear from issuers, hey, should we not launch? It's February. There's a war that just broke out. Should we not launch? Look what's happening with cryptocurrency and digital assets. Should we not launch? It's the summer. People are out. Should we not launch? Look what's happening in the economy, interest rates, the holiday season. There's never a perfect time to launch. And then once you are live, what do you do when these things are happening? It's like Jillian's mentioning, really like the angle that Derrick's pointing out. We've used a saying before of feature the flaw. Talk about why this is great. Don't ignore it. Mention the elephant in the room, but why it's a good time to invest, why this is a good deal for the cannabis market. Here in California, I've heard, hey, investors weren't very happy with what happened with this deal last year, or this legislation, or with this, or with that. For me, it's a matter of how to get a campaign to work, how to get these channels to work, how to get these investors to participate versus if they will. It's not a matter of launching a campaign, quitting week 2, quitting month 2, as much as continuing to change it up and continue this vehicle, always be raising on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And I would say also is like back to this whole idea that you're building your brand. There's no calendar year or month that's bad for starting to build your brand. Like there is just never a bad time to invest in your brand. So if you start thinking like that, instead of, oh, it's the holidays, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, there's always going to be something, but then there's always the other side of the coin on that. Well, the equity markets suck. So the public markets are not great. So what about this? So there's always multiple viewpoints on stuff. It is also about taking a leap and jumping in and getting into it and finding the right partner to do it with, obviously.
Yeah, because if you look at stores, products, that sort of thing, they're always a reason to have a sale. And it connects with the consumer subconsciously. Like, well, why should I buy this now? Oh, well, because it's Thanksgiving coming up. It's Halloween coming up. It's Black Friday. It's Cyber Monday. It's Valentine's Day. And if you look at any of these stores and products, they're always turning their sales around to And so it's the same sort of thing for this. It's just about really finding that right angle, and it will actually help you, because it will make them believe like, oh, this is why. So, okay, let me do it.
And I had a couple requests for questions on the do's and don'ts of finding the right investor. Also, is there a wrong investor? Is it okay to onboard everyone when companies need to raise money? Or, is there a right investor? Is there a wrong investor? And what's the do's and don'ts of finding the right investor?
That's a really good question. I think, and I'm curious to hear y'all's response on this as well, but I think if they get past the point of investing, it's almost like in some ways you've done the due diligence on them to where they and I'm not going to make guarantees, but more than likely they're a good fit as an investor. If they've gone through what you've messaged to them, if they've gone through the story, if they've watched the video, if they've gotten the email drip campaign, and they're taking that action to actually put dollars into your company as a shareholder, that usually, at least from what we've seen, has been a good fit. It's really the lead prospecting where you can make some of those judgment calls on, okay, we probably don't need to message to this particular audience or this. I mean, we've had, we've run Facebook ads where it was very, very clear we were running it to the wrong audience because of the type of comments we were getting in the comment section. It was like, okay, these people hate what this company's doing. So, it's one of those things that I think in that regard, you can very quickly know if it's a bad fit for a company and an investor, or a company and a shareholder. But yeah, would love to hear y'all's thoughts on that, because it's something that I do think is a really interesting question that doesn't typically get brought up, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. It's not typically brought up. We're all so focused on finding the right investors all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a self-vetting process. If they connect with your message, connect with what you're doing, and actually believe enough in what you're doing to invest, I think more chances than not, that's going to be the right investor. So yeah, but again, looking at metrics, looking at comments, looking at what kind of feedback you're getting from during your testing period or what have you, you'll find out pretty quickly where you're not hitting the mark. I don't think it would be very rare for someone to invest in a company if they didn't see some promise or have some connection or engagement or see the vision of what you're trying to build.
And we're always looking for the right investor, like Jillian is mentioning. So when we're seeing audiences perform, as Dawson was saying, A/B testing, we're looking at the performance, also looking at the comments, looking at what we're hearing in terms of direct messaging outside of that. I have had clients with investors that were a bit more aggressive in communications in between rounds. Haven't found a situation where investors were necessarily a liability. Part of one of these questions had mentioned that we did have a major influencer that was part of a video for a Reg A Plus campaign we worked on, and that influencer became a political target at one point in the campaign, and for about 2 to 3 months had to stop those ads completely because just every post getting demolished on the comment boards, and reputation management was too time consuming. Performance had dropped on those creatives as well too. We were actually able to bring those ads back into the equation towards the closing messaging, but how to watch that closely. And in today's day and age, you may need to be careful about some of the larger investors and partnerships you bring on. But again, just shift with it if anything occurs in that regard. Reg D, accredited investors can be a different story, and finding the right investor is more of an in-depth conversation there. And I remember from offline capital raise days, you know, you had your friends and family, you had strategic investors, you had ROI investors, and some of those folks that were just looking for return could be a bit more hand-holding, a bit more pressure than needed. So, you know, finding the right conversations there. But I think Reg CF and Reg A Plus and some of the ways they're structured, even having all the investors on one seat of the cap table, removed for a lot of those considerations. What are your overall messages for marketing of cannabis deals to founders, to issuers that are listening in? What should they do right now? Obviously, speak to folks like yourself and connect. I would recommend for all listeners to connect with everyone here on LinkedIn, reach out with questions. But what are some of the keys towards success for these types of raises that you want to emphasize?
Jillian, would you like to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're just getting started, I would really focus on your messaging, and you're really unpacking that your core value proposition and 3 key messages with proof points. I mean, that's the formula for key messaging. Every marketer knows it. So and come into a conversation with a marketing partner having thought about some of those ideas and, you know, tried it out on, you know, with your elevator pitch at a cocktail party or whatever. Test out some of those phrases and the language of how you describe yourself and how you describe what you're doing. If you get going on that, which is sort of like, you know, a little pilot project, you come into a conversation with people like us around the table, you know, with a lot to add and a lot to give to the partner. And, you know, I think it establishes a great out of the gates relationship. So it's just a great way to start instead of sort of just getting the meeting and saying, what can you do for me? It's your company. It's your brand. There is some deep thinking and critical thinking that you have to go through. And only you can do that because, you know your company best. So I think that is really one thing I would encourage everybody to do who's kicking off a raise or a business.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I think to add to that, I mean, I think it echoes well off of that is, you know, one of the things that we found to be some of our best clients and best issuers is when it's a collaboration. So no one's going to know your business better than you know your business. No one's going to know your goals better than you do. And so, yes, while you're hiring, you know, one of us, you know, is kind of the expert as far as messaging and story and ad placement and all of that. When it comes to your message and your story, it can't be something that the agency just cooks up and puts, you know, some pretty website around it and you're off to the races. There really has to be a lot of thought. And I mean, so one of the things we've done is we've, you know, extended our launch phase, what we call launch phase time, to where it gives us a little bit more time to dive into that deeper, because typically you're building a foundation for either, you know, if it's a Reg CF, maybe it is just one raise, but, you know, for some of the bigger Reg A's, you're looking at building a foundation for raise after raise after raise. So you've got to start off with really strong messaging, really strong brand presence and style guide, and even just the tone of what do you want your brand to sound like? Like if your brand was a person, what would that type of person be? Like these type of questions that I think when people get into a capital raise, they're quick to just, you know, give me my invest now button and let me start pushing investor towards it. And it's like, let's back up a little bit, slow down a little bit, and let's really build something special and build something for the long term, and not just hope to, you know, make a quick buck off the investment. So anyway, that's kind of the story and the messaging. It all comes together with that side of it as well.
And it skips so often. So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
glad. It really is.
Yeah, I don't know how many times everyone on this call has heard, you know, when do you need it? It's like, can we launch next Friday? And it's like, oh no. So for everyone listening on this call that's an issuer, just be patient. It takes time to build brand, takes time to build messaging and story, but it's because we're doing it for a reason, and we're doing it because we want you to be successful. So
exactly.
And to save resources, if not it's the difference between a successful campaign and non-successful campaign. Derrick, what are your thoughts on this, from the cannabis side and seeing success, on this type of capital raise, this type of initiative?
Yeah, so I would say, especially here in Canada, you really got to, build the community, because it's just so hard to advertise cannabis. If you can get flagged for anything, you can lose your page for anything, right? So I think that, really just getting that grassroots kind of community behind you, like-minded individuals, and then being able to start building that foundation and then hand it over to professionals like yourselves, who know the regulation and know where to take it. It is a good start, but don't expect magic. Don't expect there to be nothing. And then the more you can help and establish something then and test, that's going to save you money, and it's also going to make you more successful.
I'm hearing a similar message across the board here.
Yeah.
Work on strategy and do so longer with Dawson. Work with Jillian, get the messaging further. Work with Derrick and Derrick's ideas of getting the brand right and to the right spots. And I joke about it only to get more issuers to spend more time in the strategy stages. And as Dawson's mentioning, give yourself the best chance of success here. Give yourself more time. Don't launch next Friday. Don't think that you're set because you've got your legal counsel in place and your financial audits complete, and now you're ready to just acquire investors. Really have an understanding of what's going on in the space, what your audiences are going to be seeing alongside your marketing. Map out the actual individuals, look at their touch points, determine the messaging and the visuals for each of these stages, and with frequency. It's really touch point 17 that you're going to see performance. Look for strategic partnerships, have that third-party validation, and have projections across the board. Have your end goal with the date, but then work backwards. Know what you need to hit month 1, month 2, what you're going to change up, what you're going to optimize if you're not getting there. It's a big scramble if that isn't already in mind, and bring in as many resources as possible. I'm a big fan of Core Connects, partly because they bring groups like us together and other professionals and say, hey, you may end up using every group by the end of your Reg A Plus. Talk to everyone. I'm a stan. I know all panelists are on this call for a higher success rate industry wide. There's inherent risks with marketing. There's inherent risks with fundraising. Do everything that you can to build a system, a roadmap to that goal, with the most confidence behind it. Don't just launch and think that you're going to get a return. And it looks like we're to the top of the hour here. Oh, what was that, Julian?
Sage words.
Looks like we're getting to the top of the hour here. So don't know if we're wrapping exactly now, or if we have time for any more questions. If Peter's hopping back on or not. Up to you. All right. So if you want to add one more question, I feel like we can add one more thing about the cannabis vertical. This could be a case study of yours. This could, some type of success story in the vertical. This could be a channel that you see working best for cannabis. But what's one more test that we can get? What's one more highlight that we can give for this industry?
I think just knowing the limitations you're going to have with paid social, knowing what they're looking for to restrict your ad count or take your ad account down completely, that is absolutely something we have run into and had to figure out the hard way on how to make those channels work. And so just recognizing that unfortunately this space, at least at the moment, is going to come with some additional challenges that sometimes a real estate Reg A or Reg CF is not going to have to necessarily deal with. So just knowing that and being prepared for it, I think, is good.
Yeah, and I think what you could probably, one thing to tackle would be the video piece, for this channel, and the why, answering the why. There are limitations. You can't be on all the there's a lot of don'ts in this sector. But one thing you can do is tell your story on why you started the business. There's nothing off limits about that. Make it personal. And I think that's something, that's a do. That's a definite do. And I think I would encourage everybody in the sector to utilize that tool.
Yeah, for me, I would say definitely what Jason was saying about email. Email is really powerful, and also SMS, gathering people's numbers, SMS, push notifications, like just kind of try to use funnels that can get under the radar to then grab these people onto a list. So let's just say that's the main thing: building a list.
Yeah.
And as Dawson said, you could continue to use that list for future rounds and build the system to continue to raise. As Jillian mentioned, for customers and being able to stay in touch, that audience is really power. And speaking of different VCs, they want to know how big is the audience. If we apply average metrics, what type of responses can we get all the way through? I'll add one more tip, and just adding on top of what Dawson was saying, have backup ad accounts. have backup ad accounts. We create different pages, so we're not using a primary page. So if anything happens to that page, there's more acceptance of these type of advertisements now from the platforms, but we still work off systems we built years back of not using trigger words that could get your campaign flagged, your ad account, your page. If you're passing the test for what words you're using for your page, your URL name, your messaging, your landing page, you can actually get a lot of campaigns approved here. And being able to feature the function, whether you're talking about the story versus just using some words that could get you flagged.
Absolutely.
But,
the one thing that I would say about it is that cannabis is not banned on Facebook. It's actually allowed to be talked about. It's like you were saying, Jason, it's just how you deliver that message. So again,
Right.
it's about angles. And if you find the right angle, you can really cash in. And the thing about it is that it's a good opportunity because the barrier to entry. So if you find a professional like Jillian or Jason or Dawson, and they know how to do this, the ups are all there because it's harder to enter. So sometimes having a barrier is a good opportunity.
Hey, Jason, you had a question. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder while I was multitasking. If you want to recap it, maybe as we get up to the hour here and we close out, maybe I can help you with that.
It actually ended perfectly on time there with Derrick's response. We were just talking about recommendations for this vertical and for the marketing, some different workarounds. Derrick's got a list of ideas around that just from the educational standpoint, and then in terms of angles for social platforms. We were really able to cover a lot in this session, from audiences to messaging to compliance to future rounds, pivots, optimizations. Very, very happy with what we were able to discuss here, Peter. And you hopped on at a perfect point to take it to the next part of the day.
That's terrific, and I'm really, really pleased with the entire panel and everybody here. One, due to your expertise that you're always sharing, and also as we embark upon sectors that, while they may not be new, they're certainly new to a lot of investors. And Derrick, your insights and your experience are well founded, and I think as vertical communities get built, it's all about communicating between the various parties, and communicating the various parties are going to help the issuers ask the right questions, help the companies also, be better prepared going in. And it starts with the questions. So all of the panel here from Core Connects. I'm really super grateful of that you guys all attended, and the rest of the week is 3 more sessions that are pertaining to all the other nuances associated with private capital raises under these regulations, and specifically in the cannabis sector, because it is a bit of a minefield. It has ups and downs. I say a minefield only from the perspective of a lot of different regulations from different states, from payment rail providers, from escrow providers. But they can all be addressed if you put together the right team of people, and that right team of people consists of those that are knowledgeable in their respective fields. So to finish off to the rest of the week, yeah, there's experts in the legal community. There's experts in the liquidity aspect of things when it comes to ATSs. So again, I think at the top of the hour here, I thank everybody here. And Jason, I could have let you do that. I just jumped in here just because somebody tapped me on the shoulder with a question. So great hour, guys, and really, really nice to get acquainted and see everybody again. So thank you for that. I'm going to hang up. I'm going to hang up now, guys. You guys can close out as you see fit.
Well, thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure being on the panel with you here today. For everyone listening at home, as I mentioned before, I highly recommend that you send a LinkedIn invitation to everyone on the panel, unless you have a preferred form of contact, and reach out for discussions, reach out for recommendations. It's amazing what's available in this industry. You just have to spark the conversation.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks for moderating.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks
My
everybody.
pleasure.
Okay.
Great to see everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good one, guys. Likewise. Take care.